Thank you. Mahalo, Wayne. Pat, congratulations on a great conference. I'm enjoying this a lot. Aloha kakahiaka. Good morning, everyone. If I can get my first chart up. We got those back there? My picture? There we go. From sailing canoes to starships, a Hawaiian reflects on voyaging. Slightly deceptive title here because we will reflect on that a little bit, but what we're really going to reflect on is the role of people in voyaging. And this came about from a conversation that Pat and I had when we were first discussing me coming down to participate in this program. Generally, this is a very strange speech for me to be giving. I usually have sort of three types of speeches that I do. I do a general public, let's go out and get everybody fired up about space for general audiences, Rotary clubs, things like that. In front of professional audiences like this, usually I'm talking about data and statistics, talking about the latest research from the space report, what's going on in the industry. The third audience is usual politicians, policymakers, members of Congress, or various other government bodies, both here in the U.S. and abroad. So talking about voyaging is something that's special to me because it is part of my heritage. But the way that we got about this was Pat and I were talking about the industry and the people issues that we sometimes have in our industry and how we might want to confront those a little bit. One of the issues that certainly those of us who have worked in large aerospace companies know and have experienced is that sometimes we treat people like they're fungible commodities. We get a new contract, we hire a couple thousand people. Lose a contract, we just go lay off a couple thousand people, no big deal. On the opposite end of that spectrum, we know that some of our newer companies are frequently, the subject of stories about overwork and burnout. You should be delighted to be here. You should be happy to put in 60 or 70 hours a week because we're so cool. What we're doing is so cool. And that's something that I kind of bristle at. And so I think that what we really wanted to talk about, Pat asked me to talk about the Space Foundation. I thought she was going to wanted me to talk about programs and the symposium and all the things that we do. And she said, no, what we really want to talk about is how you've had this culture develop at the Space Foundation over the years that has allowed you to accomplish some of the things that you have. We are very proud to have been selected 3 times in a row as one of the best nonprofits in the world to work for. And this is a process that we submit ourselves to. It's kind of like the Malcolm Baldrige quality process, except we're not really a manufacturing company. So it's a separate process that exists for nonprofits, and it consists of a real rigorous outside audit and scrutiny by a group of experts that looks at your entire range of products and services and how you treat your employees. What are their benefits? How hard do you work them? How well do you treat them? And then, so the objective measurement is half of the score, and then the other half is an independent blind survey where these outside people come in and talk to your employees and interview them and survey them. And so they combine those two things together to come up with a rating of how good is your workplace? How do you rate as a place to work? So the first time we submitted ourselves to this, and we do this not as a contest, but as a way of gathering data to get better. So the first time we did this, we came in at number 21. Second time we did this, we came in at number 14. And this year, we came in at number 7. 7th best nonprofit in the world to work for. And so what do those things mean? It means you have highly satisfied employees. It means you have highly productive employees. Statistically, there are some interesting things. You measure things like your turnover rate. Most people in industry, the Society of Human Resources Professionals will tell you that 15%, 14%, 13%, that's kind of a normal turnover rate. If you get higher than that, be concerned. The turnover rate at the Space Foundation is 1%. The average tenure at nonprofit organizations is 4 years. There's a lot of turnover. Tenure at the Space Foundation is double that. It's 8 years. We get feedback from our employees in the form of questionnaires and things like, will you be willing to go the extra mile for this organization? Would you recommend to a friend that they work for this organization? How proud are you of this organization? Those scores tend to come in at about the 96, 97% level for us. And so when Pat and I had this conversation, it was, what could we talk about in terms of people practices, and where does that come from? And so where it comes from, I think, is in the DNA that we all bring. I think we all recognize that it's a productive type of a situation to have. We have enjoyed 20 years of continuous growth at the Space Foundation. When I first got to the foundation, the very first space symposium that I worked at as a Space Foundation team member, we had 485 attendees. And last year we had 12,000 attendees. We are really proud of our education enterprise. First 13 years that we were in existence, we managed to put 2,500 teachers through training. The last 4 years, we have put 100,000 students, teachers, and family members through our STEM education programs. So having this kind of a workforce is very effective, but it does come from, I think, the DNA of your organization. So we're going to talk about DNA for a little bit here, and this is where we'll get into sort of what my DNA is. I think every organization develops an organizational DNA. We're all accustomed to thinking about it as, individual DNA, family DNA, but I think there are also sort of community DNAs, company and organizational DNAs, and they develop over time. And so where does some of the DNA, excuse me, that I've tried to contribute comes from? And this is my heritage. This is the double-hulled canoe Hokulea. And Hokulea is the Hawaiian word for Arcturus, which is an extremely important star for navigating in the Pacific. Hokulea was built and first sailed 40 years ago as a demonstration of what had been an extinct but understood culture of voyaging in Polynesia, which explained the immigration patterns and migration patterns around Polynesian islands. So Hokulea, let's see. Hokulea, in her 40-year history, has sailed 140,000 miles across the Pacific. Various missions, various destinations. And think about this. This is a means of voyaging that was navigating from tiny pinpoints of islands in the vastness of the Pacific. And they were doing that 1,000 years before Europeans stumbled onto the almost endless coastline of North America. So how did they do that? What are the lessons? What are the similarities? I think, one of the things is the importance of the navigator. And we were having a discussion this morning about exploration plans and how you can put 7 people on a panel to talk about exploration plans and somehow come up with 8 or 9 different plans that are all supposed to be the right plans. So navigation is extremely important. So the picture on the right-hand side of the screen is a painting by the Hawaiian artist Herb Kawainui Kani of the navigator sitting at Heiau, which is a Hawaiian temple, and studying the stars. And what you will find as you go around Hawaii to some of these scenic sites, or not scenic sites, but historic sites, where these heiau have been found and preserved, is that almost in every one of them there is a navigational instruction place where the stars have been carved into the stone, and the patterns of the galaxies can be found carved into the stone. And so this idea of navigating and respect for the navigator and respect for the knowledge of the navigator is something that was hugely important to our folks. Other comparisons, the double-hulled sailing canoe is an extremely sturdy, capable, and resilient ship. To this day, the catamaran is recognized as one of the most stable platforms for exploring on that particular ocean. Very resilient, very capable. You put a lot of people, a lot of stuff on one of these ships. Very stable even in the roughest of conditions. The Hawaiians and other Polynesians, as they sailed about the Pacific, also had to do what we do if we go someplace like to the moon or Mars. We have to carry everything with us. And you have to make sure you can get enough on that ship to sustain you until you get where you're going and perhaps bring you back. Now, in this case, of course, they also had access to fish along the way, so that's helpful, but you still had to bring all the other staples and things that you needed. The roles and responsibilities of the crew. You imagine you have a crew on this thing. You have people that are helmspersons and steer the boat. You have the people that are the navigators. You have the equivalent of the commander, the shuttle commander. Everybody has to know their role and responsibility. Everybody has to be highly trained. Everybody has to know how to react in an emergency. And all those things were the same then as they are today. But it was being done 2,000 and 3,000 years ago on an ocean which, comparatively for that time, I would say the journey from Tahiti to Hawaii, which is a journey that was repeated many times in both directions, was probably as daunting to those people then as going to Mars seems to be for us today. The other thing that's really important is confidence in your leadership. You have to be ready to respond at an instant. The precision of your navigation. The Polynesians had names for virtually every star in the sky. And they knew where they were, and they knew how to use those. I had the privilege of actually sailing on Hokulea about 7 or 8 years ago, just a short trip out into the canal between Oahu and Molokai, and talking with Nainoa Thompson, who was the navigator and commander of the first mission, and just listening to a fascinating description of how they navigated using the stars. And the language and the terminology is very different. Each of these stars represented an entity, and every entity had a house. And so you had to know where that house was at a particular time of year. And if you were leaving from this island to that island, you wanted to wait until this time so you could steer towards that house. And then that was combined, the knowledge of the skies was combined with the knowledge of how the sea behaved. You can time the distance between swells and understand where the wind is coming from, how close you are to shore. So an incredible complex deal, sailing these vast distances back then. And of course, you had to be prepared for anything. One of the things, any fellow scuba divers in the room? We had some scuba divers out here. Everybody who's been on a dive boat have had the lecture about the marine head, the toilet, right? Don't put anything solid in it. Don't put any paper in it. Flushed it all this many times. It's like you would think we would solve that kind of a problem. It wouldn't be an issue. These guys had a very simple solution for it. On the back of the boat, they had a little trapezoidal arm that they would lower, and it had a seat on it. And you simply got out on the seat, did your business, pulled the arm up. The ship never had to stop, didn't have to worry about what was going through the pipes. They thought of everything. But I think one of the other lessons from voyaging and voyaging in the Pacific is that you really do have to understand the environment you're going into. We had a conversation, I think, the first night reception, Pat. We were talking about the ethics of landing humans someplace where there might be life and other life forms. And have we really had the ethical discussion about what does that mean and how should we conduct ourselves? This is another painting by Herb Kane, and it's entitled Colonial welcomes Captain Cook to Kealakekua Bay. And this was the arrival of Cook there on the Resolution into Kealakekua Bay, and you can see 2 or 3 of these big Polynesian double-hulled sailing canoes. Actually, historically, there were over 100. There was a fleet, or an armada, if you will, of over 100 of these things waiting for Cook when he got there. They knew he was coming, and they weren't sure who he was or what his intent was. And so there was a warm and friendly welcome, but it was a welcome that included quite the floating armada to make sure that things were going to go right for the Hawaiians. And of course, we all know what happened as a result of this contact. And this is a painting by an Italian artist of the death of Captain Cook. And it's a little fanciful because it shows Colonial Pu'u, the king, in the regal headdress, there at the event, and that was not what happened. It was a group of other people that were involved, and we can talk all about that offline. But the outcome of this visit was not what Cook and his people would have expected because they didn't know the environment that they were sailing into. And just as a historical note, my last name, Pulham, comes from Britain, and there are places in Britain, and so I have an affinity for British explorers. But Colonial Pu'u was my 7th great-grandfather. And so we can trace our family history back to this unfortunate event. So don't mischaracterize an environment you don't fully understand. Understand the ethics of being here. So understanding that kind of DNA is part of me, and thus part of the Space Foundation, I want to touch upon a few specific cultural concepts that have been critical to shaping the award-winning team culture at the Space Foundation. And we don't talk about these concepts in Hawaiian, obviously. We don't require the team to learn Hawaiian, but we try and implement these things in a way that's comfortable for everybody. And I do routinely get emails from my team members that start off with Aloha Elliot or Mahalo Boss, or you know, so that the lexicon makes it in there somehow. But one of the important ones is Ohana. Everybody's seen Lilo and Stitch. Everybody knows what Ohana means. Nobody gets left behind, ever. But Ohana is a much broader concept than that. In the Hawaiian culture, you have a very large, extended Ohana. We have special words. We have calabash, which is the large dish that's used for serving poi. We have calabash family, which means they're members of our family that we really don't even understand how or why, what the relationship is, but somehow they're members. We have Hanai family that we adopt. Somebody's family has a child. They can't care for the child. We adopt that child, and so we Hanai this child. We have community Ohana that sits around and figures out what's best for the community. And very importantly, even to this day in modern Hawaii, everybody has a workplace Ohana. Not fellow workers or co-workers, but family. And they treat each other that way. And so we try to create this family environment. Kupuna is a word for elder. Elder not necessarily meaning older, but meaning experienced and wiser. And so the kupuna are expected to share and develop and mentor the people around them. And so we expect that of our leadership, and we expect it really of everybody in the organization. The last two words there, malama and pono, often go together. Malama means to care for, to take care of, to nurture. And it goes often with pono. Pono is a Hawaiian concept of justice, but it's even broader than justice. It's a concept that is expressed as righteousness, almost as spiritual righteousness. And so the state motto of Hawaii, anybody want to quote that? The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. And so we tell each other, malama pono, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Do this in a righteous way that advances everybody. So those concepts are woven through our culture. We don't express them this way, but it's how I naturally think of them. And then, of course, the one that everybody knows and is most familiar with is aloha. So aloha is such a vast and complex, it means hello, it means goodbye, it means I love you, all the things that people have come to understand. But it's a much more encompassing concept than that. And so I'm going to read something. A lot of people have written about this. This was written by Landis Kearns, who is an associate editor for Huffington Post Hawaii. And I've cut it down quite a bit. Aloha means hello. It also means goodbye. But literally, aloha means the breath of life. It's a moral code, and it's an expression of love and a connection to nature. The late Haleaka Iolani Pule, a teacher of Hawaiian spirituality, described aloha as, quote, our innate sense to love things unconditionally, end quote. It's the acknowledgement of the symbiotic relationship that you have with everything in the universe. You will know the spirit of aloha when you feel it. For example, when you visit a friend's house and are welcomed by their family with open arms, or you come home after a long day at work to find that a neighbor has left you a bag of freshly picked mangoes on your porch. Just because. It's a moment of aloha can be as simple as exchanging smiles with a stranger. It can be applied to any situation, even managing a business, and I would say especially managing a business. But according to Landis, here are 5 ways to live aloha every day. 1, value and spend time in nature. Native Hawaiians have always had a deep reverence for the natural world. Aloha aina, meaning love for the sacred land, is an old concept in Hawaiian culture, but it can be found in virtually every aspect of modern life. Beyond just taking care of the land, Aloha aina also emphasizes enjoying it, which has a lot to do with Hawaii's seemingly permanent spot as one of America's happiest states. Taking time to be nature and appreciate the natural world has been shown to improve your mood drastically, and the exercise will do you good as well. 2, live in the present moment and appreciate it. Aloha is used as a salutation in Hawaii because people, whether old friends or total strangers, choose to greet each other with love and positivity. This simple positive attitude and mindset can change a lot about your approach to daily life. Cultivate meaningful connections. People in Hawaii don't just say aloha, they do things with aloha. Your boss will sign work emails, aloha with aloha. You can go down to the vendor and get a smoothie blended with aloha. Your tour buses, according to the bumper stickers, are even driven with aloha. It's as if you're constantly surrounded by it. And the Hawaiian concept of ohana, which we talked about earlier, is really driven by this and goes hand in hand with this. Number 4, choose to see the good. It's easy to get overwhelmed with the ups and downs of life, but when you choose to begin every interaction or task with aloha, you're creating an atmosphere of friendliness and love, and living with aloha may help master your own emotions and teach you to look on the bright side of life. And then 5, love, always. At its core, aloha means love and everything that comes along with it. Sympathy, kindness, compassion, mercy. It means spreading joy and understanding through small acts of goodness. Living with aloha is a daily reminder to better ourselves and the world around us and to treat others with respect. Mahalo for your attention, and aloha.
Thank you, Elliot. It's great. We need to talk more about people. So we have a few questions. I probably didn't do as good a job as Ariane did explaining the social media question app for you. So we need you folks to ask questions not just of Elliot, but all throughout the day to keep this energized and going forward. My question for you, Elliot, is when can we expect to see the first Hawaiian astronaut?
So this requires a definition of Hawaiian because a lot of people use Hawaiian interchangeably with people that are born and raised in Hawaii. Right. And those are distinct things.
Ellison Onizuka, for example.
Ellison Onizuka was born and raised in Hawaii, and so from that standpoint, Hawaii has had its first astronaut. I don't know, but I'm hoping that person is in a classroom right now who might be the first Hawaiian to go to Mars.
Someone who used the stars, his ancestors used the stars for navigation. Great. Let's see, questions from the audience here. How do you see one day the military and commercial space capabilities joining together in the future?
I think the military and space and commercial space capabilities are already merging quite a bit. The DoD procures things from the commercial world. I think they've learned a lot of lessons from NASA's experience with the commercial crew. You're seeing DARPA doing some pretty amazing things where they're just letting the commercial and entrepreneurial companies run wild and free like hummingbirds. So I think it's already beginning to happen.
Outstanding. Okay. Your cultural background is very different from the culture of the good old boys club. How do you help others empathize?
Wow. It really does start with some aloha for the person that you're talking with, and listening to that person and understanding where that person comes from, and then sharing what your own experience as a kupuna has been, what you have learned, what others have learned, and then staying with that person through the growth process.
Very good. Okay. I think those are all the questions we have for you this morning. Thank you for a great start to the day.
Thank you so much.